Hello and welcome to our reflections for today. Saturday was a momentous day in all kinds of different ways. Obviously, it was the day on which Joe Biden was finally acknowledged by everybody as the next president of America. Everybody, that is, except Donald Trump and his supporters who haven't quite got round to that yet. But it was a momentous day, and there were people dancing in the streets. They thought this was the beginning of a new time, a new era, and I hope to goodness it is. It was also a momentous day because I went to have a COVID test, and it came back positive. So I'm in the process of self-isolating for the next week or so, still to go. It's left me reflecting. I don't know how I caught COVID. I don't know where I caught COVID. I don't know what way our elaborate precautions against catching COVID failed. But it is what it is, and we have to adjust accordingly. We tried our best to think of those who are in danger themselves because they've been close to me. Not that there's that many, but we're doing our best to let everybody know. It's left me reflecting too on the way in which we often distance ourselves from the stuff we read about in the news if it's beyond our own particular small circle of life experience. And so COVID was something that I knew about. It was something that I'd read about, something that I'd spent a lot of time thinking through in terms of all the risk assessments that we had to construct and still have to preserve and to protect and develop as best we can. But I'm not sure that it ever hits home until there's somebody very close to you or you yourself who experiences all that it means. For me, the symptoms were just a change to my sense of taste, a sort of loss of appetite really, and a sense of sort of heaviness, but nothing major, nothing that means that I'm going to have to hopefully have oxygen or anything like that, or be rushed off to hospital. And hopefully by the end of this week I should be able to get back into things once again, once my 14 days since the symptoms began actually has come to an end. It made me think when I had to watch the remembrance service on the village green at Lanchester this Sunday. It made me think in a way that I hadn't thought before about how reading the list of names out of a war memorial is something more than just an exercise in reading a list of names. It struck me all the more not actually being there to read the names, just listening to them. How many of them came from the family of somebody else who had died as well? It wasn't just isolated individuals, sometimes 3, 4 even, from the same family killed, particularly in the First World War. And how all of a sudden it sort of hits home because you think about a family situation, you think about the impact that it has on a whole community. And all of a sudden you're not distant from it anymore, you're close to it, you're part of it. A real powerful community expression as we read out those lists of names. It struck me that the Methodist Church has been going through a process over the last few years of trying to engage with all kinds of different agenda items that mean very little to many of our people. They're about things that may not be particularly mainstream for most of us. And yet somehow we're being asked, as we always are, the Methodist Church, to widen our horizons, to broaden our experiences, to listen carefully to the voice of those who are particularly engaged because they have become the victims involved in a particular instance. I'm thinking particularly of the human sexuality stuff that will go to conference again this next time. Another moving way in which some people at conference suddenly had their eyes opened because they saw in front of them and heard with their own ears the stories of people who had experienced abuse, had experienced exclusion, had experienced the nasty comments of people even within our own church, and because of their sexuality or their gender. And for me, it didn't impact so much because I had known people of sexualities different from me most of my life, I suppose, since I was a student. Somehow we distance ourselves from anything that is not close to our own experience. So the issue of AIDS in Africa, the ravages throughout the continent in family and community life, meant very little to me until I went to work at a Watoto orphanage in Uganda for just a few weeks, helping to build a classroom with other people from the church I was ministering in at the time. All of a sudden it became real and significant. Likewise, the plight of hunger and poverty throughout the world became a real issue for me when I saw, as I referred a few weeks ago to seeing a child with a swollen belly, kwashiorkor, or malnutrition, in the fields and plains of Swaziland, that was, Southern Africa. Climate change and its impact perhaps means very little to us. But for some of us, we have had the pleasure and privilege of being able to see communities who live in places that would be seriously impacted. I can think of a group of people I met on the Mamanuca Islands in the middle of the Pacific, whose islands just would cease to exist if climate change wasn't to be addressed. It's the same in all kinds of different ways, all kinds of different issues: knife, gun crime victims, passers-by in the news, unless we happen to know somebody who's been impacted by it, mental health, racism, child abuse. It all washes over us if we're not careful, until and unless we have either the experience ourselves or the breadth of vision to read the stories of those who've been impacted by them. What are we to do with all of this? I think it encourages us to become more aware of the blessings that we do take for granted. I think it does ask of us a sensitivity to the plight of any victim. The personal impact of any story that we read about in our news, it's to see the news through different eyes than just our own. And to be so filled with that sense of the oneness of our community with other people across the world even, that we are affected by it as well. St. Francis, who's become a bit of a hero of mine over the last few years in particular, was so overwhelmed by the plight of those he saw around him that he even jumped off his horse to embrace a leper, however repulsed he was by the sight and the smell of the person. He knew that he had to embrace this person because he was a child of God just as he was. And one of the prayers that I say every morning as I go about my walk, which I can't at the moment because I'm self-isolating, asks for God to give me true faith, assured hope, overflowing love, deep humility, with a heart that's sensitive to the needs of others and a mind that discerns what's true, that I and others with me might thus fulfill the holy and perfect will of God. May that be your prayer and mine today. God bless.